Okay, so here we are, the sixth and final video of this series based on the book. That's why I'm here. Obviously, if you're just discovering the series of videos, I recommend you go back to the first video and work your way through them. What I thought I would do, sort of in keeping with my originally stated goal in terms of the format of this, is the time-honored approach of tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So chapter 1 is tell them what you're going to tell them. Chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5 were tell them. And this chapter 6 is tell them what you told them. So what I've done is basically taken the conclusion slides from each of the chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we'll take a tour of those, and then I'll say some sort of final words in this video. So here we go. So these are the chapters of the book. So we've been through the summary, and then we discussed where we did some background information. So where do we fit into the grand scheme of things in chapter 2, and how have we developed to get where we are in chapter 3. And then finally in chapter 4 we discussed human meaning and purpose in life. And then in chapter 5 we kind of took a break from all this talk about purpose and talked about what our role might be in the natural world given the environmental crisis that we're facing on the planet at the moment. And finally this chapter, which is the summary and conclusion. So here we go. So in chapter 2 we talked about where we fit in, and so the first thing we discussed really is the idea of levels of being in the world around us, meaning mineral, plant, animal, human. So the mineral level has composition. It's composed of atoms into some kind of order, which order is unlikely. Usually chaos is, science tells us that chaos is the normal condition of things. And yet we have this, all of the atoms of the universe have kind of assembled into these incredible forms that we see on planet Earth, but also out in the cosmos, which is what these wonderful pictures from the James Webb Space Telescope, that's what we're trying to suggest there, that order is fantastic. We like order, and it's unlikely. So that's the mineral level. The plant level has, obviously, life, and life is a magical thing that we take for granted, So, for example, when we plant our spring gardens, we take a seed or a bulb and we put it in the ground and we pour some water on it, and eventually there's this incredible thing that's growing, and we have not a bull's notion how it comes to life, but we know how to help make it grow, and we know when it is growing, and we know when it is alive, and we know when it is dead. So anyway, the plant level has life and composition. Think of the beautiful arrangement of atoms in a rose flower, Then we have the animal level, which not only has composition and life, it also has sense, perception, consciousness, which is we're even farther away from understanding what that feature is, So we know that it exists, but we don't know what it is, really, and we can't recreate it. I always think of Frankenstein's monster, sew together all the different bits, zap it with some lightning, boom, you have life. And you still have no idea what it is, Okay, and then we have the human level, which is similar enough to the animal level, but it has capacity for abstract thought and the capacity to operate outside of the laws of nature, both of which are unique to the human level. So we have different levels of being, and that's where we stand. We embody all the levels of the mineral plant, all the features of the mineral, plant, and animal kingdoms, plus we have added features. So as I said, we have limited understanding of the properties which separate the different levels of being: life, consciousness, capacity for abstract thought, and we cannot replicate them. Further conclusions of chapter 2. It is logical that there could be levels of being above us that we cannot comprehend or appreciate. Because we can't comprehend such things, we have a hard time dealing with it. It's just like the cow had no appreciation of the farmer taking care of it, and also the cow felt equal to the farmer and chased him around, and just totally ignorant of what the farmer is, So we have a hard time. We're totally ignorant of what the levels above us might be like, So another thing we concluded was that in chapter 2 is that the most probable explanation for any creation, but for our particular one, is a creator, the author of the universe. Totally logical. And to not believe in such a thing turns out to be illogical. Einstein called it the illimitable superior spirit that we're able to perceive with our frail and feeble mind. So then what I'm leading up to in this line of argument, obviously, is that the purpose of any created thing is known by its creator. So that was a conclusion of chapter 2. Another conclusion of chapter 2, just trying to develop some kind of foundation for subsequent discussions, is that religion has been a repeatable phenomenon in human history, totally unique. There's nothing comparable to it in terms of influence on society, where a humble being without education, without means, material means, without social influence, no kind of power, seemingly, springs up in some remote corner of the planet and transforms society over the next few centuries, And not only that, has real staying power. So now, thousands of years later, we're still talking about Buddha, for example. This is totally unique to religion. It only happens in religion. So it does suggest some kind of specialness, about religion. It's so unlikely that such a thing could happen. Just imagine yourself standing up and saying, "Hold on a minute, I have some great ideas. What are the chances that 2,000 years from now that your ideas will still be talked about. Chances are 0. So it's a unique thing, and religion seems to include information from our Creator. So I'm contending that it includes information from our Creator. Not that it's pure information from our Creator, because we as human beings have messed it up over the years, So therefore, religious teaching should be considered in our quest for meaning in life. It's a reasonable point of view, which I hope you agree with. When all else fails, read the instructions. And finally, another thought that I argue in favor of is, it is likely that we carry on in some fashion, that there's life after life, and we go on to places we can only dimly visualize in this life, in the same way that a child in the womb is heading on to its next life, but doesn't have a clue what it's going to be like, but it's vast compared to where the child has been living, and it's a good place. So hopefully that's the case when we move on. Chapter 3 was about human development, and so we concluded that the physical universe has evolved to ever-increasing levels of order, which is very unlikely according to science. Also, our society has evolved to ever-increasing levels of order, which is just an observation. Another interesting observation is that scientific and religious understandings are beginning to merge. So science only appeared a few hundred years ago, so science and religion didn't have to agree because there was no science. But so since then, science has emerged and kind of dismissed some of the human aspects of interpretations of religion and that kind of thing as being unreasonable, quite correctly. And there seems to have been this conflict. But now, religion is becoming more rational, and science is becoming more humble, and that'll carry on for the next long while, and understandings will merge, I contend. Another conclusion of chapter 3, which is about human civilization, is that a global civilization is inevitable, though the steps to achieve that are not clear at present. And just like the steps to achieve nations out of kingdoms were not clear. But that's the way society evolves, towards higher and higher levels of order, and so global civilization is next. And it'll take a while, but what's a few centuries compared to tens of thousands of years of human history? Spiritually, we've reached the stage where we now think for ourselves, and so whereas in the past we were ignorant and illiterate, really, we didn't go to school, my friends, until fairly recently as a race. And but now with that comes, so we can educate. We are educated and we can think for ourselves, and we do think for ourselves. And that's good. But with that comes the responsibility to think for ourselves. So we're in this adolescent stage where we kind of have our own opinions, but they aren't thought through yet. We haven't achieved maturity in terms of our ways of examining truth. But we're very happy to form conclusions. I gave the example of my daughter, who is very happy to consider becoming a Buddhist without even knowing anything about it, So that's where we're at as a race. I know what's right and wrong, or I don't believe that. We say that a lot, but we haven't thought about that, whatever that is, quite often. Yeah. So anyway, the point is that we will become responsible for our own spiritual development, thereby eventually putting priests and mullahs and that out of business. That will no longer be a profession or a calling. Not that there won't be a place for wise individuals. They just won't have any authority anymore. Think about that one. So we will be responsible for our own spiritual development, and it's a responsibility. It's not something like, now I don't have to listen to the priest. No, it's, whoops, I guess I better think about this stuff myself. So then we finally get around to discussing purpose and meaning, and these are the conclusions of that chapter. As simple as they are, that we have a twofold purpose in this life, you and me, every human being. And the first is to develop our souls in preparation for existence in the next life. This is an active thing. Life conspires to help do that too, the events of our lives. But we should be working on our spiritual development every day. And it's funny how it works. Quite often you'll go through your day, and then in the evening you'll think about it and you say, whoops, when that person asked me about, or when that person gave me change for my recent purchase, I knew it was the wrong change, that he gave me too much money. And I walked away. And when I should have gone back and given him back the money that he overpaid me, but I didn't do it. That's progress, right? Where you realize you've done something incorrect spiritually, and then maybe you'll say the next day you'll seek out that person and give it back. So anyway, this is the kind of development that our souls are going through, and sometimes just by making mistakes and trying to correct them as best we can. And then the second part of our purpose is to to develop our talents and capacities, our gifts, because that's what they are, gifts. If you have musical talent, it's a gift. It's not something to be puffed up about, So you use that talent, or use that gift, develop it, and use it in service to humanity. And so we went into that in some detail, but those are our two purposes: spiritual development and then service. Any human being can understand that and keep that in front of themselves every day as they live their life. Then we moved on to considerations of the natural world, which is under threat as we speak. So the conclusions of that chapter, which you probably just watched that video, but anyway, is that we presently mistreat nature. At present, we are unable to act sustainably. We're rowing our boat for the waterfall. We're following our fellow lemmings off the cliff. I propose that this is actually primarily due to ignorance of purpose. We don't know why we're here, So how is there, why do we do anything? And we've defaulted to this sort of materialistic point of view, which isn't working. This is a contentious one, that it is our role to influence nature in such a way that creation, which is potentially perfect, becomes actually perfect. That's a stretch, I know, but certainly an interesting proposal to consider. Another conclusion of that chapter was that since we are mostly ignorant of the complexities of nature, the wise course of action is to use our dominating influence sparingly. We've been kind of like bulls in a china shop, you know. And way back in chapter 2, where we talked about how the evidence of humanity acquiring free will was the sudden disappearance of large animals from the fossil record during the cognitive revolution, you know. So that's us improperly using our dominating influence. Then I make a case for international institutions that are needed to manage a global society. So we need them, and creating them is going to be a real challenge, but they're not optional. And then another thought is that we need to function in a cooperative manner. One of the things I didn't say is that if you imagine the planet is like the human body, so in the human body all the organs, while being different, operate cooperatively. They don't compete with each other. And the net result is health. And we need to be minded that way on this planet, which will be symptomatic of maturity when we finally sort that out as a race. So those were all the conclusions, and if I was just to sort of stand back from the book and say, well, you know, what was it about? Well, the proposal is that humanity has been on an evolutionary journey, let's put it that way. And we left the animal kingdom tens of thousands of years ago, and back then we were operating according to the laws of creation when we were in our animal-like state, and we couldn't help but function according to the laws of nature. Then our latent free will became manifest, and the trouble began. We started acting in ways, some of the ways were not according to the will of God, according to the laws of creation. So before that we behaved according to the laws of nature, i.e. we did not deviate from the will of God. After that, the Creator guided us via religion, which we followed imperfectly because we were in our infancy as a race, and then our childhood. So mistakes were made. Well, that's childhood, folks. So, really now we've reached the important stage where we can seek out the will of God for ourselves. So we want to get back to, if you like, operating according to the will of the Creator. We pass through the stages of infancy, childhood, and adolescence, and over the next few centuries we will reach maturity, and both society and individuals will integrate God's will into life, as we unknowingly did back in the days before our free will became manifest. And so I'm minded of the Lord's Prayer, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And it's only after I kind of developed this line of thinking that I realized that's what Christ was talking about, that we need to get back, if you like, to the point where God's will is our will. But we're doing that through using our own free will. And that's admirable, because then it becomes our achievement to have done that. Where back in our animal-like condition, that was not an achievement. That's the way we were programmed. Yeah. So we're on a journey, have been on a journey for thousands and thousands of years as a race. And then, as predicted in every religion, we will achieve a peaceful global society. And in that society, the potentials of every human being will be realized. Oh my goodness, we think knowledge is advancing rapidly now. Forget about it, because at the moment, I'll say 95% of human beings are not achieving their potential. Maybe 90%. But the day will come when all of us, all of our talents and capacities will be encouraged to be developed, and we can serve society, and knowledge will explode. It's exploding now, but you haven't seen an explosion really. So as that happens over the next few centuries, we'll very naturally leave behind much of the conflict and suffering of our past, which is optimistic, but that's my thesis, and I really think I can see how that will happen. Not after, not without some more suffering, of course. And so we will all understand this life as a period of incubation and preparation of our souls for the next life. So thanks very much for coming along on this journey, and I sincerely hope that some of the thoughts have been useful to you, actually useful, and that you will consider deeply your spiritual development, and that is done just by you poking around and actively investigating your own spiritual development. And obviously the primary way of doing that is to consider religious teachings which have a lot to offer. Bye-bye.